I started to see stars and see the cosmos, and I hadn't fallen over, I didn't hit my head. And during that 40-minute walk, I had access to the universe. And
Welcome to the Multidimensional Soul Channel. Okay, so today we're going to be delving into a different side of alien disclosure. So it's not just about UFOs and government files and the usual stuff you hear about on the internet. It's a more deeply personal look into how contact can look when it comes to consciousness and the experiences that people all over the world are having at the moment. I think it's not just us, it's out there. So these aren't just about sightings, they're awakenings, essentially. And for many, contact with non-earth beings or extraterrestrial beings, interdimensional beings, whatever you want to call them, can open up a lot of spiritual insights for many to be able to get more multidimensional awareness and also question what it is to be human. It isn't just about what's out there, it's more about what's inside of us and how these encounters can shift our understanding of reality.
well said, Leah.
With that introduction into what we're going to be talking about, maybe have a discussion about how that could look like or how it's looked for us, for instance.
Yeah, I think it's a great question to start with, Leah. You know, what is the nature of contact? I think we've gotten used to the public operating under the belief that contact is physical contact. So it's the way in which we as a larger group of beings interacting with other human beings. And I think we think contact will be very similar to that non-human life forms will arrive one day, make themselves known, make themselves visible, and that by definition would be contact. And look, in many cases, it very much would be. I think that's a reasonable thing to expect. However, I think that contact can look very different, and in actual fact, it has looked very different for me and for you based on what we've spoken about. So contact for me is related to the degree to which a person can expand their consciousness. So it introduces the idea of what is consciousness, what is expansion. So my experiences with disclosure had layers to it, Leah.
Yeah.
My first experience with disclosure, and we're going to use the term a little bit loosely, was when I woke up one morning at 3 a.m. about 10 years ago, and I noticed there was a lady sitting in a chair in her mid-40s. She wasn't physical in form, but she was there. They just sort of looked like some translucent projection, like a projection does on a screen.
Mm.
And that was my first experience of a non-physical being. And she was somebody who, what I now know, was in her light body, and her light body was translucent in light. She communicated with me telepathically. I was clearly very frightened at the time. It happened 10 years ago. Prior to that, I, had adhered to a very formalized religion. And then in the following months, I think I was trying to understand, what does it mean, not as in who is that person, that being, but it was more about, well, what does it mean that that's being shown? Why am I seeing this?
Mm.
And so I think that is my first example of some form of alien disclosure, meaning non-human. And obviously, I'm broadening the term from alien, not just being cosmic. A spirit being that discloses themselves may not necessarily in the spiritual community be identified as alien in nature, because it may be perceived as a spirit different to being an alien. But in my experience over these last 10 years, I would group spirit disclosure as just being non-human disclosure. And that would also mean, whether that spirit, that unit of energy, had a physical body previously, that for me still would mean that it's still non-human in when it presents a spirit. So that was my first experience, and I started to ask, why am I being placed in a position where I'm experiencing this? And then I think it went from experiencing spirit and then developing some multisensory skills around that to a few years later, I, had acquired some meditative practices that I look back now and realize what I was doing was building up my spirit body, I think, because that's what it felt like for me. And that's what I believe to be true. I use the word I think. So, there's a sense of ownership that it's just my belief. It's what my thought is.
Mm.
Then I was walking along the bay. I live in a place in Sydney where there's a body of water not far away. And then I was walking, and as I was walking, I could just see internally what was the universe, and it just would appear, and as I was walking, and so I'd blink, and I'd blink to try and clear my sight, and it was almost as though as I was looking ahead of me, where there was a body of water, there was a walkway, I started to see stars and see the cosmos, and I hadn't fallen over, I didn't hit my head, and during that 40-minute walk, I had access to the universe, and then it was after that, the following days, that I saw an advertisement for a conference at Uluru in Ayers Rock, and then I went to that conference a few months after that, and that was called the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, and it was during that period that I first saw what we would identify as an alien being. Yeah, and I was sitting down one morning with a group of people, and I was eating breakfast at the time in the hotel, and I could just see to the right of me what appeared to be a being that was reptilian in nature. So that was my sort of strong alien contact, but that was, the being I would say was interdimensional because it was existing within our form, but as translucent light again, and also operating from that other domain that it was in dimensionally. So my experiences around alien beings were spirit, cosmic, which was interdimensional, and I did have some experiences that could be seen as observable from a 3D lens, and that was often when I was meditating with other people, and I would feel that my chakra systems were used as portals, dimensional portals, and I would see sort of energy beings step out of my chakra system that I could observe with my 3D lens. But these beings were quite small, probably the width of a palm, and they were accessible through me increasing the frequency in which I was meditating or sitting at. So the higher the frequency, the more observable it was. But yeah, but in terms of what is conventionally known as a physical 3D sort of alien body standing in front of me, the same way that I would see my desk or my table, I have not seen that completely. I've seen sort of interdimensional translucent beings. And also, when I worked as a medium, I would see often in the same way we would see spirit guides, I'd see a lot of greys, so grey beings that are common and known. And I would see them as guides to some human beings that they were sort of mediumistically working with. Hmm. Did you have similar experiences at all, Leah?
It started in a similar way for me too, and it sounds like, there's an evolution to this. Like, if they just presented themselves out of nowhere, you'd probably either discount it or think, am I making this up? Or it could frighten you. But when it comes in the form of a spirit being appearing in front of you, like you mentioned, at the end of your bed. And it happened that way with me as well, back when I was, yeah, in my early 20s. And, I had lost someone close to me, and she appeared to me in a very similar way. It was in my bedroom at the time, and I just saw like a window, and then, my loved one who crossed over disappeared, like, in front of me, like, and I was doing the same thing, like, closing my eyes, opening my eyes. No, I'm making this up. There she is. And we proceeded to have communication, not in the way you and I are right now. It was more telepathic. So it was almost like I was reading her thoughts and she was reading mine, and there was something, she wanted me to do. That was the first time I had ever encountered something like that. I think when I was a really young child, I get some sort of flashback sometimes from being really, really young and having sort of contact with beings. But I would have shut that down because it was really frightening as a child. Yeah, having that first experience of seeing a loved one that had crossed over in front of me with my eyes open. And like you said, it was like a projection. It wasn't, but it felt really real. And it wasn't something that I could discount as a dream or a hallucination or anything like that. And for a long time, I found myself easily communicating. The more I would ask questions or invite her to draw close, and often she'd just show up at times when I needed a bit of comfort, and she would provide me with comfort. And then from there, me to energy healing and Reiki. And then I'd find myself having a person that I was working on, and me being in that deep meditative state as I'm channeling the Reiki energy and providing healing for someone. I would find that I would get their relatives coming through and wanting me to share a message with them. And that was the first time I'd actually made contact with someone other than my own family, which again frightened me. If that had happened to me, back in my 20s, when I was just getting used to having contact with this person that was close to me, I might have shut it down again. And then I would be pushed, tell them, tell them, tell them. And then I thought, "Ugh, I've got to figure this out. Like, is this the right thing to do? Should I be setting up boundaries? Should I be doing it a certain way?" Which was kind of what then led me to find the Awareness Institute where you're working. And then we started working together. And yeah, I think I learned an awful lot from you as well. And then from that experience, I remember you had sent me a video to watch, and I hadn't actually watched it yet, but I was on my way to a healing workshop. And one of the exercises that they got us to do at the workshop was an automatic writing exercise. And I can't remember what the prompt was, but I just recall sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen, and I started writing, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write. And then eventually, just through the action of forcing myself to just use the pen and get it moving, all of a sudden I found myself writing something that I'm thinking, where is this coming from? And I wrote, I think it was like 3 or 4 paragraphs. And it was from these beings who introduced themselves as the Pleiadians. And I didn't really have any clue as to who they were and what it was all about. And then on my way home from that workshop, I pressed play on the video that you had sent me earlier in the day. And it was a video about Pleiadians.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
It was that video that you had sent me, which occasionally I find myself going back to it and listening to it. That one, Wake Up.
It's got the Matrix in it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it starts off some scenes from The Matrix. And I think it was actually downloaded from a book that a woman called Barbara Marciniak, who had been channeling the Pleiadians. And someone had put together this little clips of the parts of the book, because then I listened to the audio book many, many years later, and I thought, oh wow, all this information is what was in that video that you had initially sent me. I'll put a link in the description. So that was kind of my first encounter with beings not of Earth.
Could somebody see what you saw if they walked into the same room, or was it seen through, I suppose, your spiritual side?
At the time, I wasn't seeing anything. I was literally just allowing my hand to write. And then this message, it was more like I was hearing it and it was being transcribed, because it wasn't they weren't my thoughts. It wasn't something that I was thinking, or I even had the intention to do that. Like it wasn't like I sat down and said, okay, I'd like to connect with some alien beings. Come on in. I'm ready with my pen. It wasn't anything like that. I think they were getting us to connect with our guides. I don't even remember what the exercise was about. But yeah, I remember clearly getting a pretty profound message that felt really personal and also prophetic. At the time, I thought, what are they talking about? I'm going to be, working with people and supporting them doing what? And it was just like, that makes no sense to me. And now here we are, how many years later? And yeah, we're running workshops on what it means to be a multidimensional being and connecting to our soul and our spirit through a multidimensional lens. And a lot of the healing work that we do with people in these groups. And that's what I was being told in that message, that you're going to be helping to support people. And at the time, I was just happy to do Reiki and be sending, the beautiful Reiki energy and light to people. And now here we are preparing for the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, when you first saw the alien beings, and now we're speaking at the conference. Like, who would thunk it?
That is very true.
Yeah, that was sort of my first experience with interdimensional beings. So I didn't see them, but I could definitely hear them and I could feel their energy. And I think it was after that we had that session where you sort of guided me through a journey to connect with them. And then I came across some information about starseeds. And a lot of that really resonated with me.
Can you explain that for the audience? What's your understanding of a star seed for those that may want to understand? So we're talking about the human body, so us as human beings, and then what we can observe through our 3D human lens. And then we introduce the notion of that there's a spirit, and some of the gurus of our time talk about the human experience is being navigated from a spirit lens, those that are able to sort of adjust to that. If we break down what constitutes a human being physiologically, that it's made up of the same stuff of the cosmos, of the universe.
If you look at what we are biologically, we're made of whatever the earth is made of, and the earth is made of whatever the cosmos threw at it, whether that has been a gradual evolution of what's sort of come onto the earth from outside of it, or it was all here during the Big Bang. But we've come out of that, haven't we, as biological beings? But then that spirit aspect of us is also a consideration, that perhaps we've had lifetimes on, in other dimensions, on other planets, in other realities, and we bring those aspects with us through our spirit into this physical form.
So the spirit is that another way of framing a version of us that is non-physical?
That's how I see it. The first time that I sort of came across the information about the star seeds, it made perfect sense to me. It didn't feel alien to me. It felt like that feels like it resonates. And then also, through the work that we've been doing for a long time, through our meditations, one time it was almost like a hypnosis that you took me through, where I got to meet my star family, and I didn't experience them as 3D physical beings. They were more like energy, like streams of energy and light and color. I found myself in that experience blending myself with them, and I could really sense and feel I was a part of them, and that they had always been with me, guiding me and supporting me. And it was almost like a coming home experience, and knowing that I was part of something much, much bigger than me. The worst part of it was unblending from their energy and then just having this feeling of being this really dense and heavy 3D body. And I remember walking out thinking, oh my God, I feel like I've got lead in my shoes. I was like, it felt just really heavy after that presence of being in this lightness and with no body and no form really. It was more like ribbons of consciousness sort of surrounding me that I had blended with. Let us know in the comments if you've had any cosmic encounters.
If you're in your star seed expression, so the version of you that is celestial and cosmic in nature, if you have access to that version of you, I wonder if you're actively in contact at that point of reference. So when you had this elevated level of blending where, quite possibly beyond your spirit, which was probably your soul, maybe, that this greater unit of energy that is more universal or cosmic in nature, that version of you, when you blended, gave you access to something that could also be perceived as contact.
Well, I guess it's going to look very different for all of us.
So
Yeah.
I wonder if the idea of disclosure, Leah, is centered around levels of disclosure.
Maybe these experiences are almost like a kind of initiation into our awakening and our soul's greater potential.
That's a really good way to look at it. So then would that mean that those that have awoken, at least from a spiritual perspective,
Yeah.
and that term can mean many things, but the idea of awakening from a spiritual lens is often experiencing the distinction between being a physical form and being a spiritual form. And so it's almost like that introduces a baseline in which you get to develop other levels of sort of spiritual growth. Yeah, so I would say yes. I would say that our level of spiritual growth and development can very much be tied into the degree to which we experience some form of alien engagement. Yeah, but I'm noticing as you and I are both speaking that it is really important to sort of define agreeable terms,
Mm.
terms that we both agree upon in terms of the definition of alien and, which is a non-human form versus the definition of disclosure, which can mean disclosure in, by whichever lens you're experiencing that moment from a human lens, from a spiritual lens, from a soul lens, and then this other new phenomenon, which is referred to as a sort of a cosmic being, a star being. But I think you're right. I think that all those versions or projections of a self, some type of sentience, will relate to further growth and development, personal development.
If you enjoyed this video, please visit our website to learn more about our latest offerings and workshops. We have a 3-part series coming up, and it'll be an opportunity to explore your soul through both the lens of consciousness and the quantum field.